Delighted to welcome to the Toolstation Western League podcast, Tom Hore, a director at Bristol Mind. Tom, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. And before we talk about the work of your organisation, I was very interested to read about a partnership that Mind have with the English Football League. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so for the last 2 years, Mind and the English Football League have entered into a partnership to try to, I suppose, create the space for discussions about mental health, for people to have sort of conversations about mental health, because their club is more sort of associated with that. I'm sure a lot of people have noticed on the backs of shirts of the players of the Championship, League One and League Two, a squiggle on the back of a shirt, and that's the Mind logo. And at different clubs, local Mind organisations have been staging different events, ranging from bucket collections to sort of fans forums to talk openly about mental health.
So obviously, Mind is very much associated with the issue of mental health. I mean, what variety of different sort of support and services do you provide people who are suffering with mental health issues?
Yeah, so here at Bristol Mind, we have a telephone helpline. It's open every evening from 7 until 11. It's a free phone. Anyone can call. It's completely anonymous. It's a free phone as well, and you can just talk to somebody about anything that's bothering you. People ring and they talk about relatives who are going through problems, or friends who are going through problems, and they want to know how they might support them. We also run a counselling service. We run various sorts of advocacy services to try to support people to get the sort of the services and treatment that they might need. We run a mental health hate crime service, which acts on behalf of people who are victimised due to their mental health. We also do a wide range of training, and we give talks to businesses, community organisations in and around the community.
And one of the things about, obviously you mentioned that you're involved with Bristol Mind. I know that there are other local Mind charities across our region, but also, of course, Mind is a national charity as well, isn't it? Could you tell us a bit about how the structure works?
Yeah, so it is a national charity, and then there's a network of about 122 local Mind organisations who are all independent charities in their own right, scattered across England and Wales, and they all provide different sorts of services as they've all grown up locally and have sought to address local needs and issues. So there's Wiltshire Mind, there's Mind in Somerset, there's Bath Mind, are our sort of our immediate local ones, Mind in Devon, Mind in Cornwall, Dorset Mind. So across the patch, there's a Mind in every area, but they all do slightly different things. A number have helplines, a number have counselling services, but also they may run physical activity groups, or they might run more sort of social groups, befriending services, and they're all different sizes as well. But we're all part of the Mind network.
Now, obviously, these are very difficult times for the whole country as we enter the second lockdown of 2020. I mean, have you noticed an increase in the number of people getting in touch with your organisation?
Yes, I mean, we have had an increase. I think a lot more people are feeling lonely are feeling isolated. We've noticed an increase in the number of people who feel anxious. I mean, I think that's anxious about the situation currently. I think that's anxious about the future. You know, when will we go back to some sort of normal way of life? I think obviously that there's a lot of people are anxious about their employment, about their housing situation. So I think there has been a generalised increase. I mean, inevitably also among young people and children, I think there's been an increase in potentially sort of difficult behaviours which may manifest themselves later in some sort of way around mental health. It's obviously children and young people have been massively affected as well. I think the withdrawal of grassroots sport, grassroots football. I'm involved as an under-12s coach with a team, and I know that after the first lockdown, we had 2 players who didn't return. Their parents said that they lost interest, and I think it's that's a real risk, as obviously sport and physical activity are great for our mental health. In general, and organised team sports, people can really immerse themselves in it, even if only for an hour or so a week. It can have an enormous impact.
Certainly at the Western League, we've been concerned about how the loss of football at our level will impact upon the fans at our clubs. Obviously, our fans are no less passionate than the fans of professional teams. And in many cases, of course, Western League clubs will cover smaller, more rural communities across the west of England, outside of the big towns and cities. So that's why we've been championing over the course of the both lockdowns the Think of a Fan campaign, because we want people to remember those people they see on a Saturday, because that might be the only contact that those people get during the week, and we're worried about their mental health. So even something as relatively silly as football during these current very difficult, challenging times for the country, if people are feeling a little bit low, that's still a good reason to take that first step to talk to somebody about their mental health.
Absolutely. I mean, I think as well, it's not a silly thing. It's one of our national pastimes. I mean, I'm a Coventry fan. I've been a Coventry fan for over 50 years, and it'll be the one constant throughout my whole life, really. People change their relationships, their bank accounts, all those sort of things, more often than their football club. So I think for a lot of people, football does play an enormous part. It's what runs through a lot of people's history. They remember things that have happened to them in their life in connection with sort of different times and sort of and different matches. And I think it is a place where people go and they share in those sort of 2 hours that they're there, share a bond with all of those people around them, even if they're on their own. But it's also a place where people strike up conversations. I mean, I've been to lots of Coventry away matches. I don't live near Coventry anymore. Go to away matches, and whoever's stood next to you, you just start chatting because you have an immediate bond. You both support the same club. You're both interested in football, and then you can go from there. I mean, I think it's an opening. It's a way to sort of talk to people, and it's a way that people can then have conversations which perhaps go beyond that. That sort of the football bit. I mean, particularly at the moment, I think it's really a lot of people, older people perhaps, who are perhaps more more isolated anyway, particularly men. I mean, men are less good at maintaining social relationships in general. I mean, that just goes, a lot of men, as they get older, and this isn't, I mean, I'm the same as anyone else, tend to neglect their social relationships more than women do. They're much better at sort of hanging on to social relationships, and because men can end up feeling more isolated and have less people able to talk to. I mean, that's one of the reasons. That's a big reason why men say they don't talk about their mental health. A number say they've no one to talk to, or they've learned to deal with it by themselves. So I think it's an enormously important thing. Football isn't just a sport. It's a lot more than that for a lot of people. It's a part of their life, a part of their being. It's a part of my life. It's part of my being. I've missed it enormously.
For people who are listening to this, who are thinking that actually they might not be feeling themselves at the moment, they might be struggling a little bit, what are the common signs that people may experience if they are struggling with their mental health?
Well, I mean anything from difficulty sleeping too much, a feeling of sadness or sort of hopelessness. So it can be sort of such signs in behaviour, so changes in mood, energy levels, or appetite. It can be physical signs, ongoing headaches, digestive issues, pain, unusual thinking or thoughts that sort of interfere with doing things, like interfere with work or with family or with such social life. A change in sort of being quick to be angry or irritable or aggressive. A feeling of a need for alcohol or some other sort of situation altering substance, drugs, etc. And thoughts about suicide as well is obviously a very significant issue. I mean, I saw a statistic that said that 40% of men wouldn't go and seek any sort of support unless they'd actively thought about suicide, which is a quite a shocking figure. I think, one of the big messages for all men is that it's okay to be not okay. And I think within football over the last years, there's been an increasing number of footballers who have talked about their own depression. Danny Rose, Peter Crouch, Lee Hendry, and players from more sort of years ago, Paul Merson, Andres Iniesta, Gianni Buffon, John Mark Bosman, who gave his name to the ruling that upset the whole sort of transfer, in Europe. He's experienced a lot of depression in his life and has spoken openly about it. So I think there's been an increasing number of players who've acknowledged it and have found a voice to talk about it, which I think is enormously helpful. If these people who we look up to have these problems and can say, I'm not okay, I need some help. I think, it makes it easier for people like me to say that too.
So if there are people at home listening to this who are a bit concerned about the way that they're feeling at the moment and would like to talk to somebody about it, what advice can you give them? What are the sorts of things that they could be doing?
Well, I think the first thing, when you recognize that you've got any sort of problem, the best thing is always to find somebody to talk about it to. Now, obviously, that might be a friend, that might be a family member. You might not have anyone. So that might be a person on the other end of a phone who doesn't know you and who you can ring without having to think, I've got to tell them who I am, I've got to tell them where I live. They will know this about me, they might hold this against me in the future, or judge me. But there's a lot of telephone helplines out there where you can just ring and you can talk to somebody anonymously, tell them anything, and they will talk these things through with you. They're not there to judge. And often, I know from our own helpline, most of the people who volunteer on our own helpline have had their own problems or still have their own problems, and that's why they want to volunteer, because they want to give people the space to sort of to talk openly. And so I think, and obviously the best is a person who's a bit nearer to you in your life, but if there isn't that, or if you don't feel able to take that step, I think to another person, it might be your GP. The old sort of saying of every journey begins with a single step, and the first step is to be open to yourself about it and say, actually, if I'm really honest, I'm not doing well at the moment. And then the second step is, right, I'm going to tell somebody about this, and and for some people, they find that enormously liberating, because at last, it's not, although you haven't passed the problem on to anyone else's shoulders, it doesn't feel as if it's all on you anymore. Because actually, it is a little bit shared, and across the country, there's been setting up an organisation called Talk Club, which is for men in different areas, and it's for men to just come together and talk about not feeling okay, and get the support of other men. And I think that, unfortunately, a lot of us as men think that other men will judge us if we admit to sort of, to difficulties, because a lot of us have been brought up with this sort of the pressure to look strong, to look as though we're in control at all times. And, with sort of James Bond, John Wayne, Clint Eastwood as the sort of the big sort of role models. But most of us know we're not like that. And underneath, we all have problems. And actually, I think most men are very open to talking about those things if they have a little chat. Last season, I was doing a bucket collection at Bristol Rovers against Rotherham, and almost all of the Rotherham fans arrived on one coach, and there was this guy who he told me he was 85, and he did look at it and he asked me what I was doing, and I explained what I was doing, and he talked to me about the death of his wife, and how his connections with the club. And he talked about the sort of the managers, the players, as if they were sort of his close friends. And he obviously, and he knew every single Muslim and who walked past us by name. But he said that it had really, it had almost saved his life. That he'd still got, he might have lost his wife, but he'd still got that, and that was a really, obviously, the source of a lot of very sort of close relationships for him. And I think, the fact that I was standing there with a T-shirt that said mental health on, and that I was talking about mental health, perhaps gave him the sort of thing, oh, well, I can mention this to this, but and that's what I often find, if I run stalls at places, and behind me on the stall all these sort of things about mental health, anxiety, depression, people let their guard down a bit. So I think one of the other things that we can do as men is to be someone to talk to, is to be a person who is approachable, who seems to be non-judgmental about things, like that aren't sort of going well, that, don't be afraid to admit it's not going well for yourself. As I said earlier, it's okay not to be okay.
Just in case anybody wants to look at more information online, or perhaps call a number, I mean, is there a website that people can go and visit after this interview?
Visit Mind's website. There's a lot of mental health organisations around the country. There's Mind, her base, and if you want to know what's available on a more sort of local basis, if you just look up Wiltshire Mind or Bath Mind or Mind in Somerset or Bristol Mind, depending on where we are. If you did live in, or if you do live in Bristol, in North Somerset or South Gloucestershire, we have our own helpline, 0808 808 0330. I'll sit it again, 0808 808 0330. And that's open every night from 7 until 11. And you can also call most Minds during the day. And if you explain what you're looking for or what you might need, they will be able to sort of guide and signpost you towards some help.
Excellent. Tom, thank you very much for your time and the fantastic work that you do.
Thank you, Ian. It's been a pleasure.